Hey everyone, it's me again, Gary, and I'm back to talk about more Orchestra things. Today we're going to be looking at workspaces, and more specifically, we're going to talk a little bit about what a workspace is and why we might want one. Then we're going to look at a brief example of how this might look in a company, followed by how we could possibly go about setting this up in an existing orchestration tool like Airflow using Amazon's MWAA. And then we're going to wrap up by doing a similar exercise using Orchestra just to see how the two compare. And if we were to look at a very small example of where this might come in a company, we would perhaps have ourselves as Team A, the data team, and we've set up 3 environments of production, development, and sandbox. And then we're going to have Team B, which is our marketing team, who actually don't need as many layers of environments as we do, but they still want to use our orchestration tool. They're going to be our second team. What we do, we don't want to impact them, and vice versa. And the reason workspaces suit this is that you want to give marketing the full autonomy to write their own pipelines, build their own integrations, build their own workflows without impacting anything the data team is doing. Similarly, the data team may need a lot more fine-grained access controls. They're going to have data scientists, they're going to have analysts, they're going to have managers, probably a whole host more people who are very familiar with orchestration tools than a marketing team. So they'll be able to split things up, slice and dice it as they need, but that might be just too complicated for what marketing are looking to do. So you can give each person their own isolated space and say, okay, manage it as you wish. But now, let's say we want to set this up using MWAA and Airflow. How is this going to look? So first things first, if we just wanted to give the data team their own production environment, we would just do exactly that. So here we have Team A, they have their production environment, and MWAA has gone away and it's spun up a scheduler, a bunch of workers, a metadata database, probably some S3 buckets or paths to store the DAGs in, and a couple of other services that Airflow needs to run. Not too bad. But let's say now we want to give ourselves a development environment. Now, one architecture pattern we could choose to use here is to simply duplicate what MWAA has given us the first time. So if we just copy it all over, fill it in a different color to prove that it's something different. I'm going to go green because dev is green. And update our S3 path to look somewhere slightly different. So it's very similar resources, but now we have 2 of them. And the same thing happens if we then want to spin up a sandbox environment for the data team. We spin it up, we duplicate all the resources again, and now we have 3 copies of each, but each pointing to a slightly different location, but it's really achieved what we wanted. Everything is perfectly isolated, nobody's impacting each other. The only downside is it's a bit of a headache to manage at this point. And really, you can kind of tell already that's only going to get worse when we bring in Team B. So if we were to bring in our marketing team as well, Team B in this case, then all we've done is spin up yet another set of resources. The same thing if they want a sandbox environment, we're just going to have to duplicate all of that again. And all of a sudden we've got 5 copies of every single resource being spun up. The team deploying them now has to monitor and manage all of these resources. And also we're going to be paying for some of the ones that aren't torn down whilst we're not using any orchestration. So even if no pipelines are running, I may have some polling services or the metadata database might be continuously active. And all of that is going to be costing me money and ultimately just adding resource and management and workload to whoever's looking after our platform. Of course, this was just one architecture choice. So before we move on, I'm just going to look at a couple of others and see what the pros and cons of that might have been. So just to begin, we'll look at the one we've just covered, where we have a separate MWAA for every team per environment. This gives us the separation we need. Nobody's going to impact each other or step on each other's toes, but we've created a whole bunch of resources for this, and Ultimately, if we add teams C, D, and E into this, it's going to start getting pretty unmanageable pretty quickly. So a second option may be that we just have 3 MWAA deployments, one for production, one for dev, and one for sandbox. But in this case, rather than giving each team its own instances of each of these, we're going to split the teams up and what they can access using the role-based access controls and the compute pools that are available in Airflow. Each team will also have its own subfolder in S3 that can be used for their DAGs. And this kind of helps us achieve this ability of nobody stepping on each other's toes, no one can interact with each other's DAGs too much. And we've tried to separate the compute out by using pools. But ultimately, the MWAA deployment is still going to end up in a scenario where as we add teams and we add pools, they're each going to start competing for the same resources within AWS itself. So if marketing are running a really long training session and building a model in production, and the data teams suddenly have to do a load of analysis because it's Black Friday or something like that, then they're going to start competing for the compute resource behind Airflow here. And the only way to scale it up is for somebody who knows the inner workings of MWAA to go in and change the parameters to get new compute resource, which probably isn't ideal if you're firefighting or in the middle of a particularly busy day. But this did help us reduce the number of resources we had to create. So we've kind of come to like a bit of a, again, not ideal place to be with our deployment, but slight improvement on before, but also still not ideal. So what if we considered a hybrid of these two, where production looks like our first example, we have one per team, they're not going to be competing for compute resources, and it's nice and separated, but we also have 2 of them. And then in dev and sandbox, we follow the second example, where we split everybody by role-based access control, and that becomes a bit more manageable back there. And this is fine. This works, and it's reduced our number of resources, but it also meets the needs of having separate teams with separate environments and not stepping on each other's resources. But now dev and prod don't mirror each other, and this all starts to get a little complicated as you add more teams and more environments and more gateways that they have to jump through. So it really starts to put the load on the team managing the infrastructure, which is not ideal. So we've seen how to set up multiple workspaces and environments in MWAA. Now let's do the same in Orchestra and see how it differs. So you can see here, I have my marketing team workspace, and one of the requirements was that these had a production and a sandbox environment. So let's have a look at that first. We come down here into the environments pane on the left hand side. You can see this workspace currently has no environments set up. So let's add production and sandbox just to fulfill that. So I'm going to call it production, give it a basic environment variable. Easy. And same again for sandbox. And voila, we have 2 environments in the marketing team's workspace. Now with Orchestra, your control plane and your compute are already separated. So there's not going to be any competing for resource between sandbox and production here. We haven't got any of that to worry about. If marketing want to try out something in sandbox, it's not going to mess up all the jobs they're running in their production environment. And that already satisfies the requirement we had in MWAA. So on top of this, let's just get down to how we add a workspace. So to add a new workspace, which in this case is going to be our data team, we can come down to here, go up to our organization settings, look at our workspaces and say, hey, data team's missing one. Let's give them a new workspace. There you go, data team. Now we can just switch over into their workspace, though of course, if you wanted them to be completely separate, you could now assign a new admin, hand it over and kind of let them go. But for the sake of this, I'm just going to do it. We click down into environments again, no environments, and we would just follow the same process as before, setting up a production environment, sandbox, dev, whatever they need. You can just come in here and create them as you need. None of them are going to compete for resources. They're not going to step on each other's toes. And this is completely separated from the marketing workspace we saw a minute ago. And even in the scenario where somebody like myself has access to both these workspaces, I still can't write jobs or tasks that reference any asset or pipeline or anything else in the other workspace. This is a completely clean slate to work on. That was it. Nice and easy. So thanks very much for watching. Let us know your comments and thoughts, and cheers.